We called him the $1 billion man, $2 billion man. Why? Because this man, Dr. Michael Lomax, has perhaps done more than any person alive to help fundraise on behalf of historically black colleges in the United States of America. And it was just so touching because Michael and I go back many, many years ago, back when he lived in Carver Court, I guess, in this section of Tuskegee Field Street, as a matter of fact, here in Tuskegee. And we reminisced about the times here at Dorothy Hall, it was called then. And he talked about his desire to one day retire and perhaps relocate to a place like Tuskegee or some quiet place after being called upon by historically black colleges around the nation. He has put many, many miles on. And we're just so delighted that he's taken time out of his busy schedule to be one of our keynote speakers this morning and to introduce our special guest, the Honorable Kevin Johnson. Dr. Michael Lomax, you've read his resume already, but we are just so honored that the City Council voted unanimously, adopted a resolution citing him for his many contributions to historically black colleges in America, but also recognizing him for becoming the first African-American chairman of the Fulton County Commission. And so he understands politics because he's been there. He was a part of Maynard Jackson's administration during Maynard's first administration. He has served as college president at Dillard University and served with great distinction, accomplishing so many things that helped to keep not only Dillard accredited, but one of the leading universities in our nation. And so I would like for you to please stand on your feet and let's welcome home the Honorable Dr. Michael Lomax, who is the President and CEO of the United Negro College Fund, who carries on the legacy of Dr. Frederick Douglass Kellogg. Thank you. And from all of our organizations.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. And Mayor, I'm supposed to make some remarks.
Yes.
Before I introduce, because you know I'm a recovering politician. So you put me in front of a microphone with an audience, and I moved from being a Congregationalist to being a Baptist, which means I could be up here for a little while. I'm not going to do that. I first of all want to thank my mayor, Johnny Ford, for introducing me and for inviting me back home to Alabama. I may have been born in Los Angeles, but black folks are not indigenous to California, Kevin. I don't know where your people are from, but they're not from Sacramento. My people are from Alabama, Mobile, Montgomery, but they're also from Charleston. You know, most black folks are really from Charleston because that's where they dropped us off. We may have moved west, but we got sold in Charleston. So let's just take a moment and reflect on the fact that that flag is down.
Yes, it is.
I wasn't born in the South, but I tell you, I got an introduction to the South in 1961 when I moved to Tuskegee, Alabama. We stopped celebrating Lincoln's birthday and started celebrating Jefferson Davis's birthday when I got here. Do they still do that here? Oh, they've combined them. Now it's President's Day, you know, U.S. and Confederate.
I think it's on Martin Luther King.
I'm going to just say something about Southern history and heritage. It is about as complex and confusing as any can be. But we are making progress. Sometimes it's hard to tell, but we are inching forward. Make one little reflection about the taking down the flag. Some of you are too young to remember Strom Thurmond. But you know that his son, Strom Thurmond Jr., was one of the ones who stood in the well of the South Carolina State Senate and repudiated so much of what his father stood for. And he referenced everybody in his family except his half-sister, Essie Mae Williams, whom I met at the Church of Christian Fellowship in Los Angeles, my home church where she attended. But I'm proud to say that when Governor signed the legislation to take down that flag, Essie Mae Williams Walker, I think it was, and her daughter, Strom Thurmond granddaughter, and Strom Thurmond Jr.'s niece was there with her uncle to applaud when they take it down. It's an incredible world we live in. And you know, they said we didn't have, that flag wasn't our heritage. Well, I think Essie Mae probably was her heritage too. And she wanted that flag down. So we've come a long way. It's good to be back home in Alabama. It's great to be back here in Tuskegee. I lived here twice. 1961, 1964, went to Tuskegee Institute High School. One of my sister Mia's classmates from Lewis Adams, Katie Smith Campbell, told me to tell my sister Mia hello. You know, you come back to Tuskegee, you don't just, you know, this is a small town, everybody knows one another. And so it's good to be back home. And I'm going to do three things, though. I'm going to say a little bit about Frederick Douglass Patterson, founder of the United Negro College. And I'm going to say a little bit about UNCF. And I'm going to close with a little bit about black colleges and where they are today and go. Because like black towns, we have a little bit of redeveloping to do. We all have synergy. You know, and I'll tell you something, if all of the black schools that were begun in the South in the 19th century had survived, there'd be more black towns today than there are. But you know, those black schools, they had oftentimes a very unconducive environment in which to develop, and not all of them survived. I think about one. There was one in Marion, Alabama. Mayor of Selma, where are you? Because Marion, is it close? Well, that's where Coretta is from, and that's where yes. But Marion, that little old town, had Lincoln Institute. You think about all those institutes that were founded in the 19th century, right after the Civil War. And it was a rough time for those schools, so they didn't all survive. But some of them did. And you think about up in Huntsville, little old Oakwood, big old farms, really, now a university. And something else has developed around, so it's not black town. But if all of them had survived, and I'll tell you the other place where black towns started was where we had black resorts. California, we had one called Elsinore. You don't even know about it now. That's what, well, you too young. We had to go there. You can go anywhere you want now. Up in Detroit, Idlewild. Idle men and wild women. My grandchildren's family used to go to Idlewild. But that's neither here nor there. Frederick Douglass Patterson, third president of Tuskegee Institute, son-in-law of the second president, Dr. Lomax. How do you become the president? The third president, you marry the president's daughter. He was obviously a strategic thinker, but also one of the great visionaries and innovators of the 20th century. Think about this. I try to tell my grandson Michael and my granddaughter Chloe, kept them away from the technology as we drove through here, and I passed by Moulton Field. I said, look at this, where we are. This is still agricultural today. Driving up here from off I-85. But think about what this was like in the 1930s when Dr. Patterson became the third president. But you know what his number one project was at the beginning? Petitioning the federal government to allow him to have a commercial aviation program. In the 1930s, a commercial aviation program in rural Macon County, Alabama. Now, he had to be a visionary to see airstrips where there were nothing but cotton fields. And he was persistent and determined. He had those non-cognitive variables. Persistence, determination. If he ran into an obstacle, he got right up and moved on. And finally, his petition was granted to create a commercial aviation program here, which then became a military aviation program. And because of his vision, an airstrip took the place of a cotton field. And black men, with the support and partnership of black women, created a program to produce fighter pilots who would fly over Italy and fight the fascism that had engulfed Europe in behalf of a country which denied them their rights as citizens. That's a visionary right here. Tuskegee Institute, now University, Macon County, Alabama. Fast forward, 1944, the war is coming to an end. And Dr. Patterson recognizes that the men and women who have helped the Allies prevail will come back. And they won't get the full benefit of the GI Bill, but they will need an education to compete in post-war America. They come back from serving in the Pacific. They come back from flying over Europe. They come back from Oakland and Long Beach, where they had been building ships. Black Rosie the Riveter. African Americans in the military production line. And they'd come back south, and he knew that they'd have to come to historically black colleges to get an education. And so he wrote a column for the Pittsburgh Courier and challenged all of the presidents of the historically black colleges to come together and create a United Negro College fundraising organization. Mary McLeod Bethune, Benjamin Mays, Mordecai Johnson, I can't call the roll anymore. They responded favorably to his urging. They enlisted John D. Rockefeller Jr. to chair their first campaign, and Rockefeller wrote letters to Henry Ford, to Eli Lilly, to Paul Mellon, to Robert W. Woodruff. I go around the country and I get shown those letters. And everybody answered Mr. Rockefeller's letter, not like mine. And he raised $750,000 in that first campaign, not an inconsequential sum, in 1944. And in the 71 succeeding years, the United Negro College Fund has raised $4 billion and helped over 400,000 young men and women earn a college degree. Fast forward, 1968, Vernon Jordan, president of the United Negro College Fund and the Urban League. Only Vernon Jordan could handle both positions at the same time. Goes to Madison Avenue and says, we're going to raise money. I need your help. Come up with a slogan. A mind is a terrible thing to waste, and the rest is history. The United Negro College Fund today is the nation's largest and most successful educational organization supporting African Americans. $100 million in scholarships alone this year, supporting 10, 12, 13, 14,000 students all across this country and at historically black colleges. Told Kevin, said, what have you done interesting lately? I said, I got $20 million from an African American donor this year. That's more than interesting. That's unusual. I was skeptical, Kevin, up until he didn't sign this agreement until 5 o'clock on March 31st, which is the close of our fiscal year. Got it back. I still was skeptical because you can sign a piece of paper, you can promise a lot. But you know, 2 days later he transferred $20 million from his account to mine. I'm a believer. And if he's giving us 20, he's got more to give away. I'm not telling you who. We're not through. There's still more for us to get in the half. So UNCF is doing well. The vision of Dr. Patterson, the foundation that he laid, is a good one. But historically black colleges, these are challenging times. In 1944, 80% of black students who went to college went to HBCUs. 1944, 80%. In 2015, black colleges represent 3% of all of the colleges and universities in the country. 10% of all the African Americans attending four-year institutions attend an historically black college or university. That's 200,000 out of 2 million. That's publics and privates. 105 historically black colleges. 3% of the institutions, 10% of the students, 20% of the degrees awarded still come from historically black colleges, and 25% of the STEM graduates that we produce right here at Tuskegee and the other historically black colleges, mostly in the South. We're the best at what we do. And that is giving first generation, low-income students that foot on the ladder to a college degree, which will not just transform their life, but transform the histories of their families. One graduate and a family's trajectory changes. So what are we going to do to make sure that our HBCUs will thrive in the 21st century as they did in the 19th and the 20th centuries? Well, I have a couple of suggestions, and then I'm going to introduce the next speaker and sit down. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make Washington do what Washington should do and has not done to date, and that is support historically black colleges and minority-serving institutions. And I am pleased to say that this week, Congressman Bobby Scott of Virginia, the ranking Democrat on the House Education Committee, joined by Cory Booker in the United States Senate, has introduced legislation that will transform the opportunities for low-income students to attend historically black colleges and other minority-serving institutions. As a companion to America's College Promise, the President's program to provide 2 years of free tuition for low-income students at America's community colleges. The companion bill, Pathways to College Success at HBCUs and MSIs, will ensure that Pell eligible, that's a code word for low income students, who go to Tuskegee or Alabama A&M or Oakwood or Miles or Talladega or Stillman, get my Alabama schools in here, will receive $9,000 in tuition and a Pell Grant for 2 years. And if a student transfers from a community college to any one of those institutions, she will receive 2 more years of $12,000. That's a transformation. Now, the bill's been introduced, but what happens next? A lot of stalling. So let me just say this to all folks here. Most of you are from the Deep South. We got to get Democrats and Republicans. We've got to get Black Caucus members and folk who are not, to recognize that this is the single most important piece of legislation potentially to impact historically black colleges and college attendance and graduation for low-income first-generation students in the nation's history in the last 50 years. Learn more about it. Don't let anybody off the hook. Don't assume anybody won't support it. Don't believe you can't get allies who are not from our community to be our allies, to be our champions, to make sure that this will be an economic transformer for black colleges. We'll go from 30% graduation rates to 60% graduation rates because the number one barrier that faces our young people is financial. Now, we have one more important thing to do to ensure the transformation of historically black colleges. And that is to get more very rich people, like the ones that Frederick Douglass Patterson enlisted 71 years ago, to believe again in our educational cause. Very rich people. Now, I found one African American who can give me $20 million. They're a rare breed. Maybe not an endangered species, but certainly a difficult one to identify. But there are a lot of other people with millions and millions of dollars. And so don't be surprised if in the course of the next weeks and months ahead, you hear that Lomax has cited some, they don't believe in everything I believe in. They don't look like me or my people, but they believe in one important thing that I believe in: the power of education. And I'm going to tell you that I believe that Americans' wealthiest people have had their hearts touched by our community in the last months. I sat with one of the richest men in the world several weeks ago. And I said, you know, there's something you don't know about the Emmanuel massacre. And that is that there were 7 college graduates in that church that evening. There were 3 black men in that church that evening. They were all African Methodist Episcopals. They were all Christians. They were all believers. They were all living their faith. And 7 of them were college graduates, and 6 of those 7 went to historically black colleges. They went to Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina, one of them. They went to Clark Atlanta University to study library science, one of them. They went to South Carolina State. But 3 of them, including Clemente Pinckney, Pastor Simmons, I think it is, and a young man who had the courage to stand up to an evildoer and say, "Don't shoot my grandmother, shoot me." We're all graduates of Richard Allen University in Columbia, South Carolina, African Methodist Episcopal College. And when I told that very rich man, people say to me all the time, do we still need black colleges? Cold question for do we still need black people? And I said to him, I always get angry when people say that to me. But now, I welcome it. Because our black colleges continue to produce the everyday backbone of the black community. We may not produce the Harvard graduates. We may not produce the wealthiest business people, but we produce the people who go to Bible study and preach the gospel and live their faith. Welcome the stranger. Embrace the stranger. And when the stranger behaves in an evil way, our loved ones forgive him. We seek justice, but we give forgiveness. Why do we need black colleges? Because we need more people like the 9 martyrs of Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. And I, for one, will spend every day of my life doing everything I can to ensure that the resources are there, to make sure that Tuskegee and Stillman and Oakwood and Miles and Talladega have all the resources they need to produce the backbone for our community, because the backbone for our community is the backbone for our nation. And all we want to do, all we want to do is be one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's why we need black colleges. And now,